Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Lots to talk about on this holiday weekend. State legislators in Madison get ready to wrap up their work on a state budget, leaving everyone wondering what is going to happen with the plan for a new Milwaukee Bucks arena, among other things. We'll talk about Milwaukee bus drivers going on strike and whether that move backfired or accomplished exactly what it was supposed to. And we'll talk about the national attention the Milwaukee Art Museum is getting for planning to display a picture of the Pope made out of thousands of condoms. All right, let me introduce everybody. You know Joel McNally, longtime newspaper columnist, and Kevin Fischer, who spent many years as a broadcast journalist in town. So did Denise Callaway, now a communications and public relations professional. And of course, Gerard Randall, education and job creation consultant. Rick Horrowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's talk first about the state budget. Lawmakers are expected to vote on it next week. Cuts back on money for highways, cuts back on some of the open records laws, completely drops the controversial prevailing wage proposals and the plan to build a new arena for the Milwaukee Bucks. Those will be taken up later as separate matters. Whether it's Washington, D.C. or Madison, Wisconsin, it always seems like these things get right down to the wire before anything gets accomplished.
I was up there all day yesterday. And it was interesting because in the past, when I've gone up on the last days of the legislative session for the Joint Finance Committee, it seems as though there are always lots of people who are there. They're packed into the room. The lobbyists are scrambling all over the place. And you can tell that there are efforts being made to get their last 2 bits in or last 2 bits out before the session ends. Yesterday, it was interesting because the tempo was modest. There were very few people who were in the committee room while deliberations were going on. There were very few lobbyists that were in the hallways. In even some of the legislative offices, it seemed like the holiday had already begun. So I think so much had already been done in the caucuses that people know the very next step is to try to get budget amendments in. And that's when the free-for-all is really going to take place. It would have been more exciting if the Republicans didn't have as large a majority in the Assembly or in the Senate as they have, because that would then lead to a whole lot more horse trading. But I do think you're going to see a lot of that, and I think those items that they pulled out of the budget are going to be items that will be fiercely debated. They're going to need votes from both sides of the aisle in order to get those items passed. And like last night, you are likely to see something slip in there at the last minute and be pulled out at the last minute that people hadn't anticipated.
So, Denise, you think the same thing happens with the Bucks arena? It'll get right down to the night before the vote, and then we'll find out what's going to happen?
Well, I think the Bucks arena is going to be a little bit more interesting. The reason that the Republicans pulled it out of the budget bill is because they don't have the votes for it. So they really are going to need Democrats, particularly Democrats from the Milwaukee area, to step up, step forward, if that's going to happen. I thought it was really interesting that one of the Republican leaders said, well, you know, we really should release all the information that's in there and show them the whole deal, because now Democrats are going to have to vote on it. Well, Democrats were going to have to vote on it anyway. The difference is now they need Democrats' votes. And I think this is where we might see some horse trading that comes in, because while certainly Democrats here in the Milwaukee area, and I really think for the most part Democrats across the state of Wisconsin, want to see a new arena for the Bucks. They want to keep the Bucks here. They want to make sure of a couple of things. Number one, that it's the best financing plan that it can be for the public. Secondly, there's some things that they want to see that are in the current budget bill now that cause them concern. So if we talk about the opportunity for any horse trading, I think that's where you're going to be able to see some of that. There are some things that Democrats, there are a number of things that Democrats clearly do not agree with in the state budget bill that's there, particularly the policy that has existed, that exists in that bill outside of any kind of any budget ramifications. So I think you're likely to see it happen. I think there's going to be more discussion. There's going to be some horse trading related back to the arena, but there's also going to be an effort on the part of the Democrats to have some of those things in the budget bill that they are particularly opposed to be removed or softened. And we'll just have to see whether or not Republicans also believe deeply enough in the fact that the Bucks are important to the state to be able to give on some things that, quite frankly, don't belong in the budget bill anyway.
Kevin, do you think there's any reason for anybody to believe that the the arena project is in trouble, real trouble.
Yes, absolutely, because there's too much public money in there. I support the Bucks. I want a new arena, but I want a better plan than the one that's out there. Actually, there is no plan. Has anybody seen the plan in writing? No, because it's not in writing. There are no numbers. Where did those numbers come from? People who sat in a room and just, came up, willy-nilly with those numbers. So yeah, there's a lot of people I think that are not so supportive, and that puts the whole Bucks arena in trouble. It had to come out of the budget because you had Republican legislators not from this area, and I can't say I blame them saying I'm not voting for that. I mean, what does my district get out of that? So they're going to have to do, that's going to be debated in a special session, and it's going to be a long, hard debate, and rightfully so, because these are complex negotiations. But I think people want to see some transparency. They want to see the details. They want to see where the money is coming from. And in the end, I think that there has to be more private money. Where are the banks? Where are the investors? There's not enough of that in there, and that's why I think that it's not soup yet.
But it's so interesting you talk about transparency, because some action by Republicans last night actually would limit transparency.
Take away all transparency.
I wish we had time to talk about that, because I agree that was horrendous.
Bad. It's just bad.
I don't know what they were thinking, but that's going to be pulled back because it'll be removed because it's such a terrible.
Wasn't that probably put in there so somebody could look like a hero by saying, "Oh no, we're going to kill
I
them"?
hope not, because
no, it wasn't.
Yeah, you look
put. I'll
like
tell you why it was put in there. It was put in there so that we wouldn't know it was in there until it was the law. And then, a lot of people could scream like a lot of people are screaming today. My God, these, how much more corrupt can you get than to shut out public information so that we don't even know what our legislators are doing, or we don't know what our governor is doing. They've already, just a couple of weeks ago, they were circulating a bill to kill the Legislative Audit Bureau, which looks at state departments. It's revealed all the corruption in the WEDC, the jobs program that Walker started. It's revealed horrendous things that have gone on in government, as it should. It's a nonpartisan agency.
And they're the best in the nation. They are the absolute best in the nation.
And that is what every citizen of this state deserves, and they're trying to kill it. They don't want us to know what they're doing because, and I've said it plenty on this show, this is a corrupt government. But the surprising thing to me about what's going on right now with the budget, there is no grown-up over there running anything. The governor of this state is not in the middle of the budget discussions. In fact, he's not even in the state. He's out running for president, running for a right-wing position, heading the Republican presidential ticket. He doesn't care anything about what's going on in Wisconsin, and he's not doing anything to get this whole thing put together.
Well,
he claims he's for the Bucks arena, but he hasn't done anything to get it passed. And Republicans totally control the government of this state. They control the governor's office, and they control both houses of the legislature. They can do whatever they want, and it turns out some of them want to do things that are so corrupt that others of them can't even stomach it, and that's what the fight is over. It's not Democrats fighting Republicans. It's Republicans fighting Republicans because some of them are doing just horrendous things.
It's a small number of Republicans who came up with this ridiculous idea the other night in the middle of the night, and it's so bad that it's not going anywhere. But to say that the governor is not engaged, he's
more engaged than our mayor.
He's on the phone. He's on the phone every day with Republican leaders. His chief of staff is practically living in the Senate Majority Leader's office.
When he's not lobbying for some donor, is that it?
To say that he's not involved is incorrect.
And I don't think this is a middle of the night thing, quite frankly, Kevin. That this popped up where it was a bunch of people sitting together and say, hey, let's see how we can further limit public access to information. If this proposed legislation would have been in place when this budget was released, it would have been impossible for news media around the state to have gone back and looked at the drafting notes regarding the whole issue and rightfully so controversy about the removal of the Wisconsin idea. So,
or the corruption about mining.
So this is not something that people just came up with. I think what we've seen from this legislature, quite frankly, what we've seen in some ways from this particular governor, is that if there's a way to be able to cut off something that's been embarrassing, a way to change something that's caused embarrassment or discomfort, they do it.
Well, I'm not going to disagree about
this legislature,
this particular policy item, but to say that to smear the entire legislature and the governor is corrupt, that's just
all right.
Poppycock.
Next topic. Milwaukee bus drivers walked off the job the other day, leaving stranded the tens of thousands of people who need the bus to get to work, to get to doctor's appointments, school, the fireworks, Summerfest. They're upset with a plan that would let the company hire part-time, no-benefit drivers so the regular drivers wouldn't have to work so much overtime. From a public relations standpoint, did this backfire for the bus drivers union to walk off the job in the busiest week of the year, or is it exactly what they wanted to do?
Well, they wanted people to know that they matter. And what we heard this week when they walk off was for the first time that they do matter. They were called the Lifeline. There was all this discussion about how necessary they are to get people to their jobs, to get people to the hospital, to get people to their appointments. And these are the working people in this community that we're giving the back of our hand to, that we're cutting wages. I could not believe the way the media reported the wages of bus drivers. I have never seen anyone say that the average wage of a working bunch of people is not what their wage is, but what they make, including overtime. You know, and it was put out in the media, well, these people walking off their jobs, not doing their jobs, you know, they make $65,000 a year with overtime. You know what they have to do to make $63,000 a year, which is what it is? Work 6 out of 7 days with no weekend. How many of us are willing to do that? Their average wage is $50,000 a year, less than $50,000, but that's not what the media is reporting. Yeah, they know going on strike and inconveniencing people is going to be, you know, there are always people ready to attack union members and attack striking. You know, very few strikes even happen during bad economies because, and this is a very limited strike. You know, it's only for a few days, but it says, we matter. Don't hire part-time people with no benefits to do our jobs. You know, I worked for a company that hired people for 39 hours a week and called them part-time with no benefits. That was a journal company. And that kind of stuff is just trash.
Should they have done this the busiest week of the year?
No. I mean, if you got an axe to grind, well, continue to show up for work. Many people watching this program that pay their salaries are working 2 jobs to try to get by. Show up for work and negotiate, keep going to the table, but to inconvenience people, and that's exactly what they were trying to do. It was just selfishly motivated. They also wanted a nice long weekend for themselves. Now, we've heard on this program many times, and I agree, that it'd be great to have more public transit, especially going from Milwaukee out to Waukesha, where the jobs are. And that we support. But then when it comes to the union, suddenly a strike is okay, all right? And it's okay that these guys walked off the job and left people unable to get to Summerfest, unable to get to their jobs, unable to get to their medical appointments. No, this was entirely selfish, and I think
they lose pay by doing it.
It backfired. It backfired on them because you can't put a positive spin on this. I'm sorry.
If the company wants to hire some part-time guys who used to work there, are retired now, to pick up some extra hours, shouldn't the company be able to do that?
Well, I think the question is, what is the long-term impact on the system itself, right? So we have these individuals who are full-time individuals, many who've worked for a decade or more with the company, who have a dedication to the bus company and who we know are going to be there. I don't see what the benefit is of bringing in these former workers who are retired, so you know they're going to be there for a short period of time, to me, it seems like the sole purpose behind it is simply to work to cut the overtime of those bus drivers. You know, and so if you want to cut the overtime of the bus drivers, approach it in a way that's honest. Say, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And this is how we think it's going to benefit you. I think what's happened is I've listened and looked at some of the things that bus drivers have talked about. It's not just the fact that they're bringing in former retirees to work part-time. There are some real issues that they have and concerns that they have around working conditions. You know, I mean, they're limited on the number of restroom breaks that they can take, and they have to find some place that's open near one of their stops to be able to go to the restroom. I just think there's some things that are related to work conditions there that are as important than anything else. And to get back to what Kevin has said, the Amalgamated Transit Union did say, you know what, let's go to mediation. It's the county that said no. We don't want to stay at the bargaining table. We don't want to go to mediation. It's the county that made that decision to step back from the negotiating table, not the union. And I think what they've done is they have worked now through the effort that they have to try to get their message out. They've not done a very good job of it. It's been very tough for them to be able to do that. But secondly, I think they have shown the important role that they play in this community. And we need to figure out what we need to do. The mediator has said that he is willing to come back to the table. Initially, it was going to be a 2-week window. He said he'll come back. He needs both parties to sign on. So if we certainly want to say to the drivers, you need to get back behind the wheels of buses, we ought to also be saying to County Executive Abley, you need to get your folks there negotiating with the mediator and figure this out, because that's part of it. You simply cannot expect the drivers to come back and to start working without knowing what the next step is, or without the county at least making an effort to sit down with the mediator and along with the union to see how this can be resolved.
Isn't the bus company trying to do just what colleges and universities do, hire part-time workers like universities hire lecturers that are non-union, non-benefited to save money?
At the expense of the workers.
Right.
And that's wrong. I support the work stoppage, because I don't think the bus drivers had any other tool left available to them. When Chris Abley sat down at the table and he tried to become the negotiator in all of this, and Denise was right, refusing arbitration in the process, it said to me that he's not a fair actor in all of this. If it was a case of where they really were looking to just manage cost, an arbitrator would have helped them to determine that. But in this particular instance, I do believe this was an effort to break the back of the union, because ultimately they would have gone from maybe a handful of part-time workers, which is the way the county administration is trying to characterize it, to having maybe a third of the drivers being part-time workers, so that they wouldn't have to pay them benefits, they wouldn't have to allow them to contribute into the pension fund, which is one of the big contentious issues that's involved in all of this. So at the end of the day, they should have allowed it to go to arbitration, let the chips fall where they may on that, and I think the bus drivers would have been perfectly content with the outcome. The county, on the other hand, and I want to stress, it wasn't a county board that was involved in this, because the administration tried to clip the board out of the process as they try to clip the board, the elected folk out of the process in all of this.
All right, next topic. Some national media, including the New York Times this week, picked up the story about the Milwaukee Art Museum acquiring the piece of art depicting Pope Benedict made out of thousands of condoms. The museum plans on displaying the piece this fall. Is this exactly the kind of thing a good art museum should do, or is it a disrespectful mistake that's going to alienate folks in such a Catholic community? You guys are heavy-duty Catholic.
Well, I think Archbishop Jerome Listecki said best.
Yeah.
What would have been the reaction if it had been, say, Gandhi with an Uzi, or Abraham Lincoln in Ku Klux Klan garb, or Hitler wearing a yarmulke reading the Torah? Those things would never happen. Mm-hmm. And even if that had been suggested, if a certain art piece like those I mentioned was donated. Before it would be put on display, there would be open, frank, honest public discussion about whether or not that should be put on display. Nope, the decision was made. It's been donated to us. Here it is. It'll go on display.
It's been sold to us.
It was donated. It was donated by
it was sold to a philanthropist who
Joseph
donated.
Pabst bought it for 25 grand and then gave it to the museum. So, but because it's in vogue to bash Christians, whether it's Hollywood or a museum or any other public institution, you can put this garbage out there. The Pope is the sacred leader of a church that has done so much in all countries all over the world to ease many people from pain and suffering, and to be put up for ridicule like this, I think it's obscene.
I heard somebody from the museum say the other day, we can't let the potential effect on donors and whether they give us money or not affect or determine what we display. Is that true?
It is true. And that if you're a world-class art museum, you don't. And I believe this is a world-class art museum. But let me say specifically in response to Kevin, this Pope went to Africa, a continent which is ravished with AIDS. There are more people dying of AIDS in Africa than any continent on this globe. And it is out of control in many countries of Africa. And he spoke against the use of condoms. Now that's, his religious teaching, but the effect of that in a country where health professionals are trying desperately to get people to use contraception and to stop this epidemic on the continent, that is deadly. And for a religious leader to do that, and he is a religious leader, and I respect him as a religious leader who has his beliefs, but there is an enormous public damage that did in the world. And for an artist to comment on that and do it with some pretty mild humor,
humor.
Well, I do, and besides that, there are art critics who are saying, you really ought to see this piece. No one has yet, and all these people that are condemning it, they say it actually is an amazing piece. Made out of 17,000 condoms, but with shades of color and things like that you can't imagine using that medium to create something like that. But it does make a political statement. And if an art museum is afraid of political statements, it is not going to be able to display a lot of art. There are all kinds of art in the art museum. Right. There are old grand masters, and there's pop art from Andy Warhol and humorous things.
We're talking about condoms
and very provocative.
I think that's the wrong response.
Very provocative pieces.
There are ways to respond.
This is a very provocative piece, and from everything we've said, it's a piece that belongs in a museum.
All right, we have to move on. The biggest arguments in our nation's history are often captured in majestic words or dramatic photographs, but sometimes they can also be crystallized in a simple piece of cloth. Here's Rick Horrowitz to explain. Rick.
Yeah, I know. Heritage. Southern pride and Southern heritage. It's amazing how suddenly the blinders have come off, isn't it? I can't say quickly, but suddenly, certainly. Don't worry, I'll get to the shirt. We're blind, but now we see. Institutions and organizations and companies all rushing to distance themselves from the Confederate battle flag and all it symbolizes. It's, how'd the president put it last week? An acknowledgement that whatever you think about the valor of those Confederate troops, the cause they fought for was slavery, and that cause was wrong. Sure, it's tempting to keep saying they fought and died to defend their beliefs. But what if we rephrased it just a little and said they fought and killed to defend their beliefs? Puts a different spin on it, don't you think? But also accurate. Anyway, the shirt, it's kind of a symbol, too. That was my plan, anyway. I created it to be a protest, a provocation. This was a few months ago when Indiana enacted something called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Essentially, it gave a legal pass to anyone claiming that their religious beliefs prohibited them from providing the same services to gay people that they'd provide to straight people. And I knew I was going to be in Indiana for a conference in late June. I could have focused on the meanness of the new law. I decided to focus on the foolishness. How will they know? That was a few months ago. And in the meantime, Indiana revised the law. The blowback had been so fierce, they had to do something. Hard to know if they saw the error of their ways or simply the danger to their wallets, but they changed it some. So I got to Indianapolis last Thursday afternoon, and the shirt made its world debut that evening in a hotel lobby, a restaurant, a convenience store. I got looks and smiles and a couple of questions and even a few words of support. That was Thursday evening. On Friday morning, the Supreme Court ruled on same-sex marriage. Legal everywhere. And on Friday night, the White House looked like this. Talk about symbols. So has discrimination against gay people magically disappeared? Of course not. But maybe my shirt is already on its way to being an artifact, a museum piece. Just like that thing.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful weekend.